Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. This is Weldie here sitting with Andrew. And before we get to the mega big season preview show, and, you know, all of our brain power is going to spew into actually what's going to happen. So our predictions notoriously are always spot on. I just had a quick question for you. And when it comes to streak-ending performances in a game, what would you say is the more clutch performance? Royce Lewis or Tony Mosey?
Mosey, for sure.
And is that just because of your blind hatred on? We got people on Twitter calling for pitchforks and ready to run you out of town for all your
Seriously?
No, not
we run a college hockey podcast.
They do want you to atone for your sins of doubting the Minnesota Twins.
I had a bad feeling about it. I have to be honest. I'll stand up for Mosey. That was an overtime goal. Lewis's homers were in the early innings.
Double overtime.
Yeah. At that. So as far as clutch goes, I would say Mosey's counts more. So I would give the tally to Tony there.
And really,
we always give Tony Mosey the benefit of the doubt on the podcast.
And really, when you actually go through it, as far as years go, I mean, by the time their first win and the because they made the tournament in what, 89 was the
yes.
So, like, as far as years go, that's got to be close as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little over 20 years.
So, I mean, years-wise, Tony Mosey more clutch. And the performance, like you said, double overtime. So, I think Royce Lewis just channeled his inner Tony Mosey and was able to lift the Twins to victory. So,
there you go.
So, any final thoughts about the game, but performance? Are you on the bandwagon? Are you coming back on? Coming around?
I mean, it's bittersweet. I have a stew of feelings ranging from sadness to anger to frustration to. Also bittersweetness as far as looking back at the 0-18. That is a hell of a streak. It's DiMaggio like.
Yeah,
it's going to be difficult to break.
No,
it's impressive. It's maybe the most impressive thing this franchise has ever done.
It's going to be up there with Cy Young, and it's going to be up there with Nolan Ryan's.
I wouldn't call it quite that. I mean, it's not quite DiMaggio because I've been monitoring this because I think the Pistons are in double digits for consecutive playoff losses. Because we're going all for major sports here. Mm. So I've been monitoring the others. And Toronto now at 6 straight losses in the playoffs. Hopefully we can put a stop to that in the next day in this series. But so it is, it is a appreciation of a streak that took so much to build. But then also, again, it's sort of sad because, I mean, my baseball fandom had really been buoyed by just jumping on this anti-Twins fandom. I'm probably not even going to follow baseball anymore. So there's that sort of sadness as well, that I'm basically just kind of giving up on the sport, which was, again, I would have done that a couple of years ago if I were trying to actually root for a team earnestly. So,
are you still going to play Immaculate Grid though?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because you can play guys from the 80s back then, and that's my wheelhouse.
That's your wheelhouse.
So
obscure 80s.
I mean, I'm going to be interested in how this series shakes out. It's a best 2 out of 3. So the Twins aren't. I mean, I know that they're already planning the victory parade after winning one playoff game in 20 years. But they still got to win the series, and then there's some better competition ahead. So
just let us have this. Let us have this one shining moment that we can grab onto.
It's difficult to. I was literally like nauseous, like physically sick as the final score. I mean, you kind of knew after about the fourth inning that this was done.
No, I didn't.
It was not to be.
I watched a YouTube video that was an hour and 40 minutes long of Twins failures in the playoffs, and it was a really good.
Which is a great. I watched a little supercut, nothing like that long, but it was like 3 or 4 minutes of just all of what 0-18 was, and
yeah,
God, there was some great stuff.
There was some really
Punto overrunning the base, and one of them was.
Yeah,
I had forgotten about that one.
Yeah. There was
the whole Pat Borders situation in the 04 playoffs. They got that guy. They traded for him the trade deadline. The guy was like retired. He was playing in the majors to collect pension time. The Twins said, let's bring him on the roster because he was the 1992 World Series MVP. And that guy, he was the guy that gave up the pass ball for the winning run in the decisive game. And he had a couple of clutch at-bats that he did nothing with in game 2 as well. That episode I had forgotten about that. I mean, the Mauer with the Phil Cuzzy foul ball, which I think people kind of overhype because he ended up walking. It basically cost them one base, and they probably wouldn't even scored the run anyway.
Oh, they would have scored the run because the next 3 hitters had hits.
I don't think that's true. They had loaded the bases, and then they didn't get. If they would have gotten the guy to third base with less than 2 outs, they would not have gotten a run home.
I mean,
that's just how they do it in the playoffs. But it's been some good, and like starting the Uber driver in the playoffs, and the grand slam that true. Gregorius hit to halfway to Mars off of Duffy. That one was great. There's some really good ones.
Yeah,
some very good ones.
The video that I watched, and it had it showed the peak winning percentage from Fangraphs of every game. Like the end result of if you would have bet money at the peak that the Twins were going to win and lose all of it, just the odds of them losing. And there were some 91%, 96% win, and then they just blow it. So it's a fun video. So, all right. Anyway, let's head back to
hockey. The infamous fish story.
Let's talk about more fun topics to talk.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, timely, I guess. I might as well say a fish story. We might not hear anymore since the Omaha has a new announcer now.
Such a shame.
So do you think it was our commentary that had anything to do with it? They were like, we can't become
Absolutely.
a bit on the Huskies hockey podcast. So we gotta axe this.
Well, I mean, there's the possibility that I'm assuming their color guy is still the same because he's been doing color for them for a long time, maybe their entire D1 run. So maybe he might be the keeper of the fish story. And
it gets passed
maybe
out.
We're going to hear more of it.
Ooh.
Because he's got to train the new guy into the ins and outs of Omaha history. And yeah, the first home game, the guy's going to be like, wow, there's a Zamboni on the ice, a mini one. He's picking up a fish. Wow,
I've never seen this. Oh, funny story about that fish. And then a period and a half goes by.
So
I guess you got a point.
Maybe we'll get more of it. Yeah.
Well, maybe. So, let's do it. NCHC preview. Well, do you want to do NCHC preview first, or do you want to do weekend preview? I think we should do season preview.
It's up to you, producer.
Perfect. Let's do season preview.
You're the host.
I kind of figure best way to go about this would just 8-1, and then maybe a little tidbit about every team, why we picked where we did. And then we'll kind of
just in general, it was tough.
Oh yeah.
I would say I had 3 teams sort of solidly in place. Really 1 team, like ice frozen in place. 2 that I was somewhat confident on, and then the other 5, it could go. I mean, there's 4 of those 5 I'm not even sure top half versus bottom half. Like 3 through 6, spin it up in a blender, because I won't be surprised really any way the standings shake out this year.
Yeah.
Other than if Miami's more than not
Miami's higher than 7th or 7th or higher. That would be pretty much it.
That's the shocker.
Yeah, even going to 2 through 7, I guess I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe 2 and 7, if they're up maybe a couple or spots or down a couple of spots for the 2, it wouldn't surprise me that much. And I think a lot of that is going to have to do with, injuries and just how basically some of these new guys come in and how everything kind of shakes out. It's going to be a lot of intrigue, and I wouldn't be surprised. We might be way wrong when it comes to it, and it's like, oh, well, it's like throwing a dart, really. So
you feel I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but you feel pretty confident about your number 1 team.
I do.
You said 2 through 7.
Yep. I feel confident about my number 1 team.
Okay.
So,
well, I'm interested when we get there, but let's start at 8, which is the world's worst kept secret.
Well,
I think we've already divulged it.
So, I obviously have North Dakota at 8 because I hate them. So
they weren't too far off last year.
That's true. It's clearly Miami. Miami, I don't know where they go, what they do, how they even right the ship. It's, just coming from their CCHA days, and this has not been a good transition. They have not been able to keep up with really anyone else in the conference. And now obviously losing their goaltender, which obviously I'll talk about Pearson in a little bit. But I don't really understand where the scoring is going to come from. And now the defense has got some holes in it too. It's at bad special teams. I just don't see a lot. I mean, this might be conference wise, this might be a 5-win team max. I mean, and though there might be a couple of, sneaky ones that kind of come in there, as everything could happen in this conference. But this Miami just looks far and away the worst team in the conference. You're on mute right now.
Thanks for that tip. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's been a bad team since Bergeron took over. No double-digit win seasons for Bergeron so far. And as you said, like, they've lost some of their better players over this last year. Pearson moves across conference to North Dakota, and then losing Red Savage to Michigan State. But to give you an idea of, where do they go from here? It's like last year their top scorer, Barbolini, who's still there, 25 points, and then they didn't have anybody else that cracked more than 15, and so they couldn't score. Pearson, for all the hype he gets, didn't have a very good season statistically. They lost a bunch of guys in the transfer portal, not just guys like Savage and Pearson, but role guys as well. And Bergeron hasn't shown a proficiency in getting recruits, or at least, he's able to get a guy like Savage, who was, had national team development program experience in some, draft pick, and he never really produced much in his time in Miami. Bet you he'll do a little bit better in Michigan State. But so I just don't know. I don't know where the positives are for this team. And seemingly every other team in the conference is at least rising. I mean, there's, Western, we think, might take a little bit of a hit this year. Omaha, I'm not certain that they're going to repeat a top half of the conference performance that they did last year. But CC's kind of on the way up. UND, Duluth, they're always sort of in the running. St. Cloud and Denver, obviously. There's really no real competition I see for 8th place. And so by default, I can't put them anywhere else but 8th because I just don't see any real strength of this team, unfortunately. And it's sad to have such a consistent doormat in this conference. When the conference was started 10 plus years ago, that was kind of thing. It's like top to bottom, this conference who's gonna finish last place. And well, as it's turned out, I mean, CC was kind of the volunteer for that position.
They volunteered as tribute.
It's been bouncing back and forth, but the last few years, at least in the 2020s, let's say, it's been Miami's in the cellar on a yearly basis. So, yeah, I'd like to see it coming together for them because it's nice to have a strong conference, but and they don't play a terribly difficult non-conference schedule, so the chance of them getting to double-digit wins this year, I mean, they had a decent run in non-conference last year, but didn't win hardly any games in conference. Your prediction of 5 conference wins, I might go with that. It's good over-under to set for them, and I think it'll be difficult for them to top that. But she'll see how it plays out. But they're the one sort of team that if they put it together and have a great year, even a 500 year, that would just blow my mind. Like, whereas everybody else, even CC, like if CC competes for a pairwise berth, wouldn't terribly shock me. But yeah, Miami, don't see a whole lot there, and I think it'll be another long season in Oxford.
And I feel like bad almost for fans of that team. I mean, almost obviously, but just to have absolutely no sense and direction from being a powerhouse to becoming this. It's basically the only thing I really have written down regarding Miami. You have all question marks. You have no answers. So that's who I have as well at 8. No surprise there. 7. Who you got?
Again, I had to grapple with this, but because I think they got the best goalie in the conference, but I got CC at 7. But it's
as do I.
It's a 7 that comes with
and I agree with you as well that they do have the best goalie in the conference.
And that's Caden Mbereko.
Yep.
We've sung his praises throughout last year. I still think he should have won goalie of the year. I think that Corona, I would have placed him 3rd out of the finalists.
Don't
put Flat Cozy from Omaha above him as well. But I think Mbereko is the real deal in goalie. But we've seen in this conference that good goalies, like the 1 year that Pearson had a really good year, where he then was the preseason goalie of the year the following year. Miami was still 8th place in Pearson's solid season in Miami. Having the best goalie in the conference doesn't guarantee you anything, really. You can still finish near the bottom with the best goalie. Because from their perspective, I think offense is really what was lacking last year. And their best player, Hunter McCown, left for the pros.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Chris Mayotte, their coach, has proven himself already to be an adept recruiter, getting guys like Mbereko with World Juniors experience into the fold, and they were able to snag a couple of guys in recruiting that'll come in this fall. A few of them which were drafted by NHL teams over the summer, and so those guys are going to be exciting for them. But got a guy like Noah Laba as well, who freshman last year showed some signs of being a decent player, and he might slide into that top scorer role for them this year now that McCown's gone. But it's going to be a young team. It's going to be an unproven offense that's probably going to have to rely on winning a lot of 2-1 type games, which, yeah, for all the praises that we sung to Iberico and how I think the narrative at the end of the year when they sweep Western Michigan in the NCHC playoffs, beat Denver, and then lose somewhat handily to St. Cloud in the title game in the Frozen Face-Off, that sort of brief flirtation with a tournament berth, it kind of elides the fact that they went into that Western Michigan series on a 13-game losing streak. I mean, it still was not a great team. And so they're just not a proven commodity as an all-around team. They have one star player, but I just don't know where the scoring is going to come from. And if you're a young team, you might be able to get away with that in other conferences. In the NCHC, it's going to be a tougher task to rely on freshmen and sophomores to carry your offense. I wouldn't be surprised if their underclassmen are the top 4 or 5 guys on their score sheet at the end of the year, but I don't think that's going to translate to a serious postseason threat. But they are an intriguing team. I think they're maybe this one next year, see how they progress this year, then maybe next year not only would they maybe threaten for a top half of the conference seeding, but potentially they're a legitimate NCAA tournament contender. So I think the program's headed in the right direction. Mayott's been doing some things that guys like Chris Bergeron at Miami haven't done in their time since taking over. And so I think the future is pretty bright in Colorado Springs, but I just think it's still, we're a year away from being a full-fledged contender.
Yeah,
I talk about the Tigers.
I agree. I'm thinking about a year or two away. I'm a little bit harsh when it comes to this, but I'm reserving Mayotte. I'm reserving my judgment on Mayotte quite yet. I know he's kind of the darling of the press when it comes to, oh, look, he's got the program going in the right direction and all that, and a deep tournament run in the NCHC probably had a lot to do with that as well. But it's, I just like to see a little bit more body of work before all of a sudden we put him on a pedestal. I want to see him actually showing more direction when it comes to it. So I'd like to see this team kind of make some steps in improvement before giving him, Coach of the Year honors or anything along those lines. So
he might lead the league in terms of coach speak ability. I think you brought that up last year where one of his in-between periods was just rattling off.
Just a Rolodex.
Pucks in deep and gotta keep moving their feet. And it was just cliche after cliche after cliche with the coating of slickness over it, glibness. That was quite impressive. So he's got the patter down. Now he just needs to prove it in the wins and losses standpoint.
So it'll be really intriguing to see how and what kind of comes from this team. But I'm not going to put him just on that high horse just quite yet. So, I get where people are coming from. And a lot of his recruits that I see, especially his forwards, but, also it's a lot of USHL. I think there's only, just kind of going through. I mean, doesn't go into any of the Canadian leagues or anything along those lines. So it's a lot of seasoned players that are used to playing in that tough league. So, on paper, I see why people would put them a lot higher than we are. But I just don't see it as of yet. And, my jury is still out on Mayotte. So we'll see where that one goes. Sixth place. Oh, something I just thought of actually just now. I'm just going to put a random percentage when it comes to percentage that they would be in the top half of the NCHC. So Miami, I would put at 0.5% that they're going to make the top half of the NCHC. CC, I'd probably put it around 10%. Even that.
I'll go under on Miami. I'll go under 0.5%.
I just can't say 0. And that's the thing. Maybe 0.1.
I can.
No,
I'll say 0.
That's not how it works.
For
there
Miami
is a percentage chance, but okay.
I'll tell you what. If Miami finishes in the top half of the league, I will buy you a beer.
Hey, I like that idea. So
can CC, it be 10%? I might.
Can it be a growler?
Sure.
Yes.
Let's make it 2 growlers. In fact.
Whoa, hey. I'll pick
we're splurging.
Yeah, I'll pick Backshed and 3rd Street. There we go.
St.
Cloud Zone. All right. CC.
Yeah, I might go a little higher than 10% with CC. Not terribly higher, maybe 17%. 1 in 6 chance.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Emberico will steal them some games, but as far as scoring goes, there's just nothing there. 6th place.
I agree with that. I'm almost like tempted to. I'm just looking at my list and I'm like, I want to make that change. I want to
make all my changes, but I'm just going with what I have written down. It's kind of like when I play.
Yeah.
I've got a couple rules when it comes to when I play trivia. One of them is, usually just go with your first instinct. It's when you get into that, well, maybe it was, fill in the blank. And then it's like, nope, I should have just stuck with it. And then at any time there's a number, I always add 1. So if it's like, if I can name 6 of something and the answer is like, how many of blah, 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 I'll be like, I'm probably forgetting 1. So 7. So many times that's worked out for me. So like I said, I'm even looking right now. I'm not really happy with my list, except for number 1. I guess is just makes sense. But everything else, I'm like, yeah, I could switch it around and whatnot. So this is where I think it probably gets to closer to like 50% that they're in the top half of the league.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So,
all right, I'll spill it. I got Western at 6.
Oh, Western. I've got North Dakota at 6.
Really?
I do.
Wow.
So what do you want to talk about?
Well, we could talk about both.
Now
I can then disclose where I put North Dakota, or
sure.
Do you want me to still sort of trickle it out?
Sure.
You can say where you put Western, I suppose.
Okay.
Again, as I mentioned, like 3 to 6 right now. I'm thinking like the final weekend.
Yeah.
Who's ever in 6th still will have a chance
at home,
third.
At least home ice.
Yeah. So these are all clumped together.
And I did make a point of when I said that, I had Western at 7th, I think was my hot take when I did the KVSC guys. But then I actually started looking at their team and did a little bit more digging into it. And I do have them higher. I do actually have them at 4th, which I don't really love, but at the same time, I'm just kind of going with it at this point.
That's interesting because I have North Dakota at 4th, so we can sort of do both of these.
Perfect.
Knock both of these out.
All right. Let's talk. You had Western at 6. Let's talk about Western.
Sure. Yeah, because my 5th place team, I'm thinking like if I'm just going those 2 teams, I probably would slot Western ahead of that 5th place team, which I'm not going to divulge at this second. But I still think. I don't know. It's so close, but and I've mentioned before how I trust Furschweiler a lot more so than like Mayotte, which we were just talking about, because Furschweiler has been able to, just in 2 years, but steps in that first year, takes a Western team kind of out of nowhere. Didn't really have many expectations after Andy Murray's tenure had finished, and brings him to a regional final. They win their first NCAA tournament game. I think they were the number 1 seed in that regional, I believe. Yeah, they were the 4th overall seed that year. And then last year, after losing a bunch of their key guys in that first Furschweiler year, say that 5 times fast, but they were able to reload, with guys like Ryan McAllister comes in as a freshman, an older freshman, but he steps in, has a great season. Jason Poland, we never really knew the exact correct pronunciation with him, but he had a near Hobie year. Player of the year in the NCHC. Remind me if that was correct or not. He had an excellent season. Yep. Sasson as well. That was that sort of line that really vaulted them to a second place finish in the conference and another NCAA tournament berth. And so coming back this year, so you're losing Pollen. Sasson is gone. McAllister is gone. And it's similar to the year before where you lost your top 3 or 4 scorers, maybe even 5 with Adder at the defense. It's a similar situation where you're losing kind of your 4 or 5 best players, at least offensively. And
that's why I originally had them like at 7. I thought they lost too much. But digging in, I liked who they have returning and some of the additions that they've made.
Yeah, they were active in the transfer portal. They got a couple of guys that have NHL names attached to them on programs, meaning that they were drafted. Some of these guys like Constantini, who was in North Dakota, a player originally, had a really bad year for him last year. I think he only scored 1 or 2 goals. He's looking for a change of scenery in Kalamazoo. To call him a drafted prospect probably overrates him just with that alone, because I'm not expecting him to have all of a sudden have a 30-point season. But I don't know. Like I said, Furschweiler is a guy that seems to get the most out of the players that play for him. And
now, correct me if I'm wrong, though, but Constantini had a decent freshman.
He had a decent freshman year,
and then just that.
I think he scored against St. Cloud at least once or twice last year. I can see maybe his best games were against the Huskies, but decent first year, but it's sort of sophomore slump in his second year.
8 goals, 13 assists, 21 points in 35 games as a freshman. I'd take that.
Yeah, and if they can get something close to that, then sure. Mm-hmm. That's a nice pickup for them. Colangelo, I believe is his name, from Northeastern. They picked him up. They have some intriguing prospects that came in through the transfer portal. Now, I've never been a huge fan of Cameron Rowe, their goaltender. He had, I would say, an average season last year for them. Not great by any stretch of imagination, but not god-awful either. They might need a step up in the goaltending department this year, because I'm not sure they can win as many 6-5 type games that they were able to the last 2 years. We'll see if he manages this a third time, where you lose your top 4 scorers, you reload either through recruiting or transfer portal, and you do it again, sort of with. I know that we mentioned they're 12th in the preseason Austro poll. Again, take that with 1,000 grains of salt, but. I feel like there's, at least with the conference, not sky high expectations again. And so if he does this 3 years in a row, then we've really got to learn our lesson and think that kind of assume that Western's going to be a top half of the conference team until Furschweiler proves otherwise. But so far, 2 years and 2 kind of marvelous coaching jobs. If he can do it a third time, that's mighty impressive. But I'm still going to play the pessimist for him this year. I think that you lose these guys again, plus you're not relying on as quality of a goaltender as I think the rest of the contenders in the league have. That's why I'm not super high on Western. Now I want to hear your take on 4th place. You're a little higher on that than I am.
Yeah. When I I was the one that got it done, Luke Granger. I thought he had a really good season. I really like his game. Dylan Wendt as well as just kind of a solid all around player. I do like how they're coming back with a good amount of their defense is coming back, and also they're picking up that Dallas Stars draft pick, who had to sit out a game, or had to sit out last season because he played some games in Sweden as well. So I think their defense is going to be improved. I do like Rowe, except he does give up some really weak goals. I do think if he does tighten that up, which I think he will, that's where it's going to kind of vault them maybe a little bit higher. But it's, if Rowe doesn't take that step forward and the defense and the penalty kill is still abysmal, it's going to be kind of a tough road for them to hoe here in the NCHC this year. But I do have them maybe a little bit higher than I originally thought I would, just because I was looking at the names that were leaving. But I do see that they might be kind of a really tough game, and I really like how Ferschweiler coaches these guys. So,
yeah. Speaking of the defense, in his 2 years, he's proven to get a lot of his offense from the point. Mentioned Adard, and then also Joyeux in Ferschweiler's first year, the 21-22 season. Both those guys had 30-plus point years from the point. And then last year, they got this Zach Galambos from AIC, a transfer portal guy, as well as Chase Berger, another transfer portal guy. I believe he was from UConn, I'm going to say, another transfer portal acquisition. But they both put up 20-plus point seasons from the point. And so he likes to factor in the D when it comes to offensive production. Obviously, a lot of that is power play driven as well. They've had a very good power play. As you mentioned, it comes at the cost of not the best penalty kill. But, they're certainly a contender team. If we're going to try to peg a percentage of them finishing the top half, as I mentioned, 6-3 in this conference might be separated by 4 or 5 points. Mm-hmm. And so I might say, because of their sixth, I don't know if these averages need to add up to 100.
I don't think so.
Because I'm not going to cheat to say that, there's 75%, every team's 75% chance to be top half from this point forward. But with them sixth, I'll say, 45%.
Sure. Yeah. But I'd say probably somewhere in the I would probably even say 66. I actually like them a little bit higher versus like them a little further down. Even me having them at 4, I see them at 3 or 2 more than I see them at 5 and 6. And I know I'm in the minority when it comes to that. At least how I look at it. But
I'll tell you why I kind of had them 6. It more has to do with the teams in front of them. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Sure. Do we want to do North Dakota because we mentioned them, or do we want to move to our 5th place team?
Nope.
It's up to you.
Let's go. Let's do North Dakota because I had them at 6.
So let's start with you then.
Yep.
Why are you so down on the Effin' Hawks?
And it's actually not really for the reasons that have been really popular on Twitter. A lot has been made right now about the fact that it's a completely new defense. And I get where everyone kind of latches onto that because it's kind of a fun storyline, and we could, tell a lot of jokes about LOL Brad Berry is a bad coach because he can't keep his players. But in the end, they're rehauling all of their defense, but their defense was really bad last year. So now how much of a step up can they make, especially with duct tape and Band-Aid of a who's who of people? Who knows? And not having that stability, I think, is going to be maybe a little bit of key, especially early on in the season. Now, I haven't really had a chance to look at their schedule kind of early on. Well, you start out with Army and then 3 Big Ten teams. And then they don't leave North Dakota until November. Jeez. Anyway, you do have kind of, I think, a little bit of the security on the fact that obviously the Minnesota series, that's going to be big. And I think that might be kind of a telling sign right off the hop for them. But then you got some time to get your feet wet when it comes to Minnesota State. And then, you're at BU, which is going to be tough.
At BU.
But when it comes to conference play, at Minnesota Duluth, which I don't have ranked much higher than them. Miami, Bemidji, so you've got some time to kind of get some points there. But I just think that a hodgepodge defense that is going to take some time to get some kind of chemistry. And I don't think Pearson is that good or nearly as good as everyone expected. He stole a couple games from Miami. Yes, I will give you that. But looking at his stats and his numbers, and you can always say, oh, yeah, he was on a bad teams. And, I can also counter that with, who else was on bad teams? Janine Adler. She was on terrible teams, and she still posted a 930 save percentage. A sub 900 save percentage isn't going to get it done in the NCHC. I don't care what team you're on. And the fact that, now he's going to North Dakota and everyone, praises him as this immaculate goaltender. And I just don't see it because I just find him really inconsistent when he's on. Sure, he's on, but I just don't think that he's going to be able to carry North Dakota. And combine that with, I think North Dakota is kind of a one-line team as I see it right now. And I don't think they have the depth as a lot of the other teams do. And I don't think, or like to go up against a lot of the defenses that are going to be prevalent in the NCHC. So that's why I'm sitting North Dakota right now, where they're at. Where do I have them again? Sixth
place. I got them in fourth, but I don't think they're going to be too far away from sixth. It's going to be, I think, that middle pack of the conferences where I've got them. I agree with you on Pearson. Speaking about like Furschweiler, if you can do this 3 times in a row, then we can sort of gain some trust. I mean, look at North Dakota. This is the 3rd straight year they've brought in a goalie via the transfer portal. Every offseason, it's like, oh, God, we finally solved the goaltending issue. We got Zach Driscoll. Thank God. I mean, we just had this, we have Shea leave, but we got this best conference goalie for the CCHA coming over. Watch out. That was a struggle. They were able to make the tournament that year, but Driscoll was hardly stellar that season. And then last year, with bringing in the Michigan State goalie, whose name is Hildebrand. Or not Hildebrand. That was an old Michigan State goalie. I am forgetting the name of the goalie they had last year. DeRitter. Thank you. Tap dancing now for you to look that up online. But here's a guy that even I was thinking, the Huskies goaltending question marks last year, maybe be in the market for DeRitter. It's glad they didn't, because he had a worse year than Driscoll certainly did. And I mean, there was times where that Jacob Helston was getting some of the time, and he was no better. They'd even dipped into their third goalie at one point and he gave up had like a 7-goal game that he goaltended against, and so their goaltending, they plumbed the depths of their goaltending last year. And that was, again, the storyline coming in, is that they kind of hit a home run with a transfer goaltender. And so they're trying it for a 3rd straight time, and we're hearing the same kinds of storylines about, well, you scooped up a great goalie. And as you mentioned, you just look at those back of the baseball card stats. Yeah, they're not. I don't really look at goals against, because that's where a bad team in front of you can really hurt your stats. But a lot of times look at DeRitter. He's played in front of a bad Michigan State team, and his save percentage was fairly decent, because that's the one benefit of playing a team that gives up a ton of shots, is that your save percentage generally can be high, because you can still give up 5 goals, but you can save 40 shots a game because your defense lets that much rubber through. Typically, having a below 90 save percentage, it's not good news no matter what the quality of the team in front of you is. And so, can he put it together? Sure. I mean, he did it his freshman year at Miami, and he's certainly going to be playing in front of a better team than he would have been playing in Oxford. But if I was a North Dakota fan, and thank God I'm not, I would not be super confident. I would not be super confident that Pearson is going to be some sort of magic potion here that's going to solve all their other question marks. And yeah, rebuilding the defense on the fly here. I think they brought in some decent guys through the transfer portal, and they also have some higher end freshmen coming in as well, recruits. Guys like Keaton Pearson, who came in from Michigan, a good stay-at-home defenseman, not going to give you much offense. I think he only scored 1 goal in his few years at Michigan. A guy like Garrett Pike from Alaska, they were successful the last time they dipped in the portal to get a transfer defenseman from Alaska with their guy last year. God, I had this in my head today, and now it's all mush. But he Jandrick, who had a 30-point year from last year, Alaska transfer. Pike maybe doesn't have that sort of in him as far as like a 30-point season, but a couple of 19-point seasons from the back end for a Fairbanks team that at least last year was pretty solid. I also like the Bennett Smolik, who they got from Mankato, sort of part of the Mankato diaspora after Hastings left. Smolik, son of a former NHLer, Doug Smolik, didn't play last year due to injury, and he didn't do a ton in his first year with Mankato, but I think he's a guy that can be an offensive threat as well as a stalwart defensive presence as well. He might be the best of the bunch they picked up through their non-recruiting side of things when they're rebuilding the defense here. Also got a guy from Sacred Heart, your favorite Atlantic hockey team, who had some decent years in Atlantic hockey.
This year, my favorite Atlantic hockey team.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not maybe not in past years, but Logan Britt is the name. He's a grad transfer, so he'll just be this year for North Dakota. But it is going to be very interesting to see how that shakes out. But as you said, they don't have to do a ton to improve on what the defense was last year.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just interested to see not just how their defense is going to play in terms of shielding Pearson in net, but also if they're going to generate some offense there. I would be skeptical that they're going to get a guy like Jandrick who's going to put in a 30-point year from the point. But, if that's how their power play sort of evolves throughout the year, one of these guys that we mentioned might be sort of that power play presence that factors into a lot of goals. I would agree that I think that top line, they are sort of top heavy. I always hesitate to call a team a one-line team, but that might be the case, although I will say it might be the best line in the conference.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think I'm a little bit more confident that I think they still can score the goal, can score goals enough to compete and at least be in the top half, albeit at like a fourth place finish rather than, I don't think this team is seriously going to compete for a Penrose this year. Again, knocking on wood, because I really hope that they don't. But it's always nice that they do. I like last year when they're in the bottom half of the league. It's a good place for North Dakota,
right, exactly.
Just in general. But I do have some faith that they can at least score the goal, at least put some points on the board. Yeah, it's just kind of going to be a matter of how many they're going to let up.
Yeah. And then one other transfer that they did pick up from Omaha, Cameron Berg. Who
good pickup.
Yeah, is a really good pickup from them. So I don't know if they're going to be plucked with Gaber and Blake on that line. Cameron, I don't remember if Cameron Berg's a center or not. But anyway, it's but that gives them maybe a little bit more firepower and maybe helping a little bit in the scoring. I just, again, like you said, going too many times to the transfer portal for the goalies and hasn't worked out yet. I don't see any thought process I don't think it's going to work out now. So number 5.
So I got my fourth place team was North Dakota. I picked Omaha for 5 because I want Omaha to play North Dakota in the first round of playoffs. That was why I picked them ahead of Western.
Sure enough. Okay.
Who do you got in 5th?
I like it. I've got Minnesota Duluth in 5th.
Okay.
So we flipped.
I promised I'd have a lot to say about Duluth, just for Dan Jacobson's benefit. I have Duluth a little higher.
Yep.
But it's more of like a reverse jinx.
Gotcha. You're Twins fanning it, trying to
and let's hope that my reverse jinx works better on Duluth than it did the Twins this year for me. But again, these are the 4 teams that I'm Duluth, North Dakota, Omaha, Western, that I'm really sort of unsure about. I think are all kind of get clumped together. But how about we start with yours? We'll start with Duluth. So you got them at 5th.
I got them at 5th. Yeah.
I have them at 3rd.
Just outside of home ice.
What do you feel? What do you feel about that? Why are they 5th?
Why are they 5th
in your mind?
The big thing is for me that I think the offense is again going to be a little bit of a struggle for them. Now Steve's is, one of the best players in the conference, and, I'm getting Blondie back as well. I think is going to be kind of a big boost as well. I just don't know where a lot of the other goals are going to be coming from. And then obviously, they do tend to play that defensive style a little bit more, and that really slows down other teams. But when it comes to in goal, if Stejskal is going to be the guy coming back from everything that he's had to come, kind of overcome, how is he going to be? I think that's just kind of a big question for me, in that, which is why, 5th I kind of put as maybe a little bit of a cop out right in the middle, because I can see them being really anywhere above or below.
Travis is overcome with the moment right now. He just can't quite understand how Duluth is 5th. He had to get out of his system though, but now he's back. Are you all right there?
Yeah, I went to a Queen tribute band concert over the weekend. So I don't know if anyone could tell my voice is a little bit more hoarse. But ever since then, like even still, like there's been this little tickle / cough kind of like irritant hoarseness in my throat that I've been just kind of battling. And every once in a while I go on a coughing spree and then decide not to cough in your guys' ear. So
we appreciate that.
Yep, exactly. So obviously I talked about, Steve's Blondie coming back is going to be big. Dominic James as well, I think was a force as well. It's so really it's kind of, after you get through from, Stejskal, and after that, I guess just, hopefully everything's kind of, okay on that front, but we'll see how everything goes for Duluth. But I think it's going to be a little bit of an up and down season, maybe a little bit streaky when it comes to it. And I can see them again. I could see them as high as probably 2nd and down at 7th if the wheels really fall off for this team. But Sandy is always kind of able to keep his team on an even keel and really put a competitive team out there night in, night out. I don't know really about their defense. It doesn't feel like there's as big of a stalwarts back there as there normally is. So that's kind of the big thing why I have them down at the lower half of the conference, but just outside home ice.
Yeah, I think they're going to miss Kaiser from the back end. Brought in Luke Bast from North Dakota, one of those defecting defensemen from the Effin Hawks. And so I do think, they're bringing in a Pionk, great. I bet he'll be good.
That's true.
But and Will Francis, he's going to be out for probably the season. You mentioned Stejskal, the cancer battle. Now it's Will Francis having to deal with that. So never like to hear that. And he had a decent start to his career as well, but don't expect really much of anything from him this year, and hope he improves health wise. So the defense is going to be more of a question mark than it typically has been for them. And I do agree with your assessment of the offense. I'm not putting them third because I'm really sold on this team. It's just somehow they find a way to do it. I'm just looking at their page on CHN. I'm just surprised by the amount of draft picks that they have with, Luke Lowhite, who's got 36 points in 4 years, a drafted player as a forward. And, guys like Quinn Olson, who's, a decent player, but I don't consider him a game changer. Biondi, I think, can be good. He had a very good freshman year, or sophomore year, I should say. Last year struggled before getting injured, just 6 points in 17 games. But I think a lot of that was injury related. They get him back healthy, former Mr. Hockey winner. I think he can be perhaps their, one of their top scorers. I do think Dominic James is solid as well, and he always seems to play well against the Huskies. Bringing in a transfer player in Connor McMenamin from Penn State, put up 60-some points over 4 years with the Fighting Godowskis. And so I think he will contribute to the team as well. And as you mentioned, Steves had a great year in his freshman year and did it particularly well against the Huskies as well. Got that great goal spread with him, 21 goals, 7 assists. And so it's good to see those. But yeah, those there definitely are question marks. Somehow they tend to get things done. I mean, think about it last year. I mean, they just were not that great of a team last year. Yeah. We're mentioning Steve's being kind of their best top scorer, but Biondi being hurt and all that. Sort of the first half, they kind of sleptwalked through, and Stayskull had to sort of hustle at the end of the year to get his goals against above 9. And him and Thiessen, who was the other goalie that played a decent chunk of the season, their goals against was just a shade over 90%, which for them is
save percentage.
Save percentage, I should say. But for them, being so used to guys like Fanti and Shepard and the whole run of goalies they've had for like a decade prior, that was a huge step backward in terms of their goaltending performance. But with all of that sort of disappointing season, they were still able to get 5th place in the conference and give St. Cloud a good run for their money in the playoffs. And so for some, it's just they always play better to what the sum of the parts are, and so chalk that up to goaltending, chalk that up to the rabbit's foot, or wherever seems a good fortune they have, but somehow they get things done. I would say even though I have them third, and again, that's mostly kind of like a troll type pick from my perspective, but you're talking about like North Dakota's schedule as well. I do think Duluth has a chance to flirt more so with I think they have an opportunity. Maybe they're not third. That's where I'm picking them. But even if they're lower than that, I still think they have a decent chance of making an NCAA tournament run because I think their non-conference is pretty solid. I mean, they got opportunities to pick up some key wins. Maybe it's going to come down to how they perform in non-conference. We saw last year, we knew that something was up when they got swept at home against Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And this was not a Mike Hastings Wisconsin team. This was a Tony Granato Wisconsin team. And so last year, their non-conference did not help them at all.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't close, that sweep, right?
I think one of the games was maybe a 1-goal game with an empty netter. I think the other one was like a 4-1. We have the internet here. I suppose I could check.
5. Okay, they lost 5-2 and 3-0.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, getting outscored by 3 to that Wisconsin team is... and bad.
36 shots for Wisconsin on the first night. I mean, UMD outshot them both nights, but not by a terrible margin. So that was not good, but that's the thing about non-conference. It can make or break your season as far as being the difference in pairwise to make a spot versus not making it. you got some opportunities here against Michigan Tech right off the bat here with the Hall of Fame game coming up this weekend. Northern Michigan, who seems to be decent. Then you got games at Cornell. You got a home and home with the Gophers. And then you got this Wisconsin tournament in Wisconsin over the Christmas break, where you're going to play Northeastern and what might be an improved Wisconsin team this year. So they have some opportunities to, if they're gonna play more closer to 500 in the NCHC, if they have a winning record in those non-conference games, that might vault them into the pairwise territory that we've seen. They're so dangerous if they're inside that, if they're in the field in this NCAA tournament. So, again, when I said 3 to 6, these teams are sort of interchangeable to me. I just have UMD being on top very slightly, but I think that like UND, there's a lot of question marks, and they're just going to have to prove me wrong or right, however it plays out. But another intriguing team to think about.
And maybe a little bit of a quick clarification. I mean, I obviously with the health battles that Stasiel has, I mean, he did play last year, but you never know when anything like that can kind of resurface and whatnot.
Right.
So,
and hope it doesn't.
Obviously, yeah. So just to kind of recap, so from 3 down to 6, you have Duluth, North Dakota, Omaha, then Western.
That's right.
Okay, gotcha. And then I have Omaha, Western, Duluth, North Dakota.
You have Omaha in third.
I have Omaha in third.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I suppose we should talk about those Mavericks.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I Omaha, when I was kind of looking at their team, I first off, I really like Latkozy as a goaltender. I think Latkozy is probably, I mean, definitely one of the better goaltenders in the NCHC. My gut even says maybe just under Emberko. I would put him that high. And I've just kind of always been had this little soft spot when it comes to Omaha for whatever reason. But I think they're returning, a lot of players up front that were incredibly strong, even with Berg's departure, with Miller coming back, Randall. They've got highly touted Alutki that is not related, I believe. Or is he related? No, I don't think so, right?
Spelled differently too. He doesn't have the middle E.
That's right. I don't want to KVSC a moment there when the Lazat. I don't want that.
They've got 2 Lukis, actually.
Yep, they've got a Lutke and a Lutke, I believe.
Well, they're both spelled the same.
They both spelled the same.
LUDTKE, which I think Josh is LUDKE. I don't know if Josh has the T in it. Again, we have the internet. I suppose I could check this. But as we mentioned with the KVSC guys, that's annoying to have that many players with that similar name. And as we're thinking different pronunciations, this is... So Lukey for the Huskies does have a T, but his is LUEDTKE.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not even sure if Lutke, I think those guys even corrected us with the correct pronunciation. I can't remember how to pronounce Josh Lutke. I have no idea about the Omaha pair.
So,
but
anyway, Tanner has really kind of turned some heads from some people from Omaha, and had a really strong USHL campaign where he scored 32 goals there. So, and then also I really like how their back end is set up. So I think they have a really good presence when it comes to what they have up front, what they have returning from on the back end, and a really strong goaltender as well, in my eyes. And that Latkozy is going to be the number one guy. And just with the defensemen they have coming back, I think they're going to have a really good shot to make some noise. And I think my bold prediction for this podcast right here, I think Omaha makes it to St. Paul.
Wow.
I know. They haven't made a conference tournament. They haven't made a conference tournament since Joe Louis Arena, I think, is the last one they went.
They haven't made the neutral site phase of a conference tournament since 2005.
Yeah.
So that's close to like Twins 2004.
Exactly.
I suppose that we're doing this time of year.
We're breaking streaks.
In this era.
We're breaking streaks.
I suppose. Well, I got them playing North Dakota in the playoffs. And we know that their specific history with that team in the playoffs is not rosy. But, I think it's a solid team. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. The one thing about Latkozy, who I agree with, I think is good. The thing here is he split the season last year with Bucharski. Is that his name? But 20 starts apiece for those two. And so this year he's going to have to shoulder much more of a load. And he hasn't done that yet at the college level. So that's kind of an X factor that I do think he is a good goaltender. But I mean, he was helped along by basically just playing one game a weekend last year. Let's see how he transitions into being the guy for both nights of a weekend series. Give me something that's probably a little bit new for him. So we'll see that. It's maybe, again, it's weird. Like I was saying about Western and Omaha, even before we were doing this, I'm like, God, I think Western, but between those two teams, I probably would put Western above them, probably because I just feel like Furschweiler has earned more of a benefit of the doubt than Omaha and Gabinet have. Omaha has struggled to put together 2 solid straight years in a row. It seems like if they have a good year, then we're going to hear from them for a couple of years, and then they'll come up again, but they'll disappoint in the playoffs. And so, I mean, it would not shock me. I know we got away from our percentages of if they're going to make the top half, but Omaha, if I got them above Western, I had Western at 45%. I'd put Omaha right at 50, 55%, something like that. It certainly would not shock me. It wouldn't shock me if they make the NCAA tournament either. As you said, I do like that top end offense for them with Randall coming back, 30+ point year last year. Now he's a grad student, so he's got the experience, and he had a really good year last year as well. It's going to come down to, we've seen this with them in the past too, where they'll, especially their top end guys, rack up a lot of points in early seasons, particularly in non-conference. They typically don't play a very grueling non-conference schedule. When it comes to NCHC play, playing the Denvers, playing the North Dakotas of the world, they tend to struggle in those games, and it's going to come down to that. That's why I'm lower on them in the league, because I just don't see them stealing a ton of points from the top echelon of this conference. But I also like the defense that they play as well. Mancini in particular, I think is a good defenseman for them. They play a physical game, but I wouldn't call them like a 2-1 type team. I think that they play hard nosed, but they can also play upbeat, up tempo offense as well. That's kind of like going back to like the Blaze days, thinking like Ortega and those guys. It was more of like again, wouldn't call it run and gun, but it was more definitely an offensive first team is how I kind of pictured the best years of their program. And I see a different style with Gabinet. It is more physical because I think they're trying to, compete with the best in this league. And that's kind of what you got to do in the NCHCs, play a little bit more physical and big. But also I think that they're, so I think that they can put the puck in the net, and I think they can defend as well too. But just that X factor of them not being able to prove it quite yet, I think that's what sort of holds them back for me this year. And that's completely unfair and taking like a non-quantifiable argument as
kind of like how I am with Mayotte. It's kind of that same thing.
Right.
It's like I'd like to see a little bit more, and I get that also with Omaha. Is I'd like to see them actually make those steps forward where they haven't. They make those.
It's always been a consistency thing. Yeah. Like even within a season, like we saw it last year, sort of like the end of the first half, where they're playing very well, and then they go out to CC and get swept. And it's just like I remember that weekend because we're like, see if Omaha can sort of have a, take care of business weekend against a lower half of the conference team.
Because they took out
they
Western,
weren't able to
right?
do it. Right. Swept them. I think it was after that weekend where they swept Western at home and then go out to CC and get swept.
That's right. And that
one step forward, one step back.
That Western was that shootout where
it's a 7-6 game.
Yeah, 7-6, and like Omaha was up like 7-4, 7-3, like something like, and then all of a sudden like Western started mounting a comeback.
Right,
it's a crazy game to watch via box score.
Right, and and they'll play a handful of those types of games. Omaha does, they have it. They definitely have the ability to put up points. But just something about them. Just maybe it's something like, betting on a team that's lost 18 straight playoff games. Like, I'm not going to put, like when you're saying they're going to make St. Paul, I ain't taking that bet.
You're not taking that bet?
No.
So
I'll take the bet from you.
Okay.
I'm not going to make the bet myself.
Well, I don't feel that comfortable that I want to bet a growler on it. So I'm gonna hold off on that.
You got to write that one down because I'm gonna forget that. What was that? 2 growlers if Miami makes it or finishes in the top half?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. You're on.
You're on. Awesome. I love those types of bets. All right. So number 2, then, since that's where we're at, number 2. Who do you have?
And number 1, I suppose we're going to be disclosing where number 1 is here too.
Mm-hmm.
You say you didn't have to think very much about your number 1 team.
Correct.
Pretty confident about your Penrose champ.
I am.
And that Penrose champ is?
I'm boring. I got to go with Denver.
I'm going with St. Cloud State.
There we go. Oh man, decisive. I like it. For me, Denver, first off, they eliminate the hole in net with getting rid of Corona. I think that's a big step forward for them. One of my favorite...
coming out strong, coming out of the gate hot.
One of my favorite Major League 2 quotes was that Roger Dorn retired, eliminating that hole at third base. That's kind of the same thing with Corona, is that, well, he's gone, so that helps Denver's chance. Don't know who they're replacing with him. Didn't even look that up. Don't really care. I think he's going to be better than Corona. And I think they just have the depth and their ability to reload every year. And they're just strong in all facets. I think they're going to be kind of the team to watch. I think they're going to be really just night in, night out. It's going to be just an absolute grinder with them. And I think they can kind of beat you different ways. Obviously, with Boyum and Barons there on the back end, I think that's some of the best tandems when it comes to defense in the NCHC. But with the just the power that they have up front, Massimo Rizzo, Aiden Thompson, they just have a lot more depth. Tristan Burrows coming from the Big Ten. Well, that was
Divine had a good year.
Yeah, Divine had a good year. Burrows was obviously coming from Minnesota the year before, but put up decent numbers here last year as well. And I just think there's too much depth there. There's too much scoring. And I think that it's probably going to be, Caruso, who hasn't had a lot of games because they kept tossing out Corona in there.
I would assume it's Matt Davis. I mean, he got 13 games last year.
Oh, that's right, Davis. That's what I meant. Yes,
a 925 and a sub 2 GAA in his time last year. Country music singer Matt Davis, as I've mentioned before. Mm-hmm. I'll look that one up. Young kids. But yeah, this was the team that Go Huskies Woo branded as a one-line team. You're mentioning all the guys they had on their second and third line. Bros, Divine, all those guys. They're kind of moving up now. 2/3 of that top line last year with Mazer and Dornbach are gone. But I think the best of those three, which was Rizzo, he's still there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would assume it's going to be Thompson on that line with him. I'm not sure what the other line mate would be, but whoever plays with Rizzo, that might give some competition with the North Dakota top line there with Gaber and Blake for the top line in the conference. Because I think, whatever you say top line with Denver, it doesn't matter who the players are. Go back a couple years, 10 years. I mean, whoever the top line for Denver, that's going to be one of the best lines in the conference.
Yeah.
Going back to like the Pacific Rim line, they've always seemed to crank out the top end elite scorers, and they run a great power play. Last year, their penalty kill struggled. I do think this team has some holes, and I agree with you on Corona. I'm not as hot takey about him, but I consider him more of an average goalie. I don't think he's bad, but I certainly don't think he was worthy of the praise.
Maybe I'm leaning into the bit a little bit, but I do find him overrated. Or did, I can say.
Yeah, and we'll see with Matt Davis if he can do it over a full season. Yeah. It's one thing to do it in spot appearances, playing on a very good team with very good defense. We'll see how he handles the major workload here. And again, there could be some other time for some of these other the backup that you mentioned, Caruso, who is older than him. But we'll see how the goaltending situation shakes out. The back end too. I mean, Mike Benning was their best goaltender, best defenseman last year, offensively and defensively, kind of an elite player. I feel like he sort of flew under the radar based on the other sort of high-end talent that Denver had. He was one of their best players, all-around players. But they keep, cranking out these D men with, they just love the letter B.
Yeah.
Because we had Benning and Bouillon and Barons, probably number 2 and 3 on the depth chart as far as defenseman goes. And now they got another Bouillon coming in. This is on CHN. He's an 05 birthday, so I'm not sure he might be coming in next year. But in any case, they got another Bouillon in the pipeline. And then they got Brown and Buckberger. Boston Buckberger is his name. So it's like bees upon bees upon bees. I hope that some of these are drafted by the Bruins. But it's just a lot of bees at the D. And I bet you they're pretty good because the ones that Denver recruit typically are. And so, this is going to be a tough team. I would say that they are the odds-on favorite. I mean, they were the preseason poll for the NCHC. They were the number 1 team. Your safest money is probably on Denver.
Yeah.
I happen to go with St. Cloud, but Denver is going to be right up there at the top, either one or two. I don't see them falling too far. We've really only seen one kind of down year from Carl, and that was the COVID year, which Schlossman and others kind of what was the blame game there, that they didn't practice enough? They weren't able to practice as a team enough. That was sort of the reason that they didn't put it all together like that year. It was some kind of unconvincing argument. But since then, wins the national title in 2022, another number one seed in the NCAA tournament year last year, and high expectations coming into this year, and certainly not just a contender in the NCHC, but nationwide. They're going to be definitely a team to keep an eye on, and quality team there. But I just happen to like the team that we cover a little bit more.
All right.
So maybe we want to discuss that a little bit.
Why is that? I've got St. Cloud at 2. You've got them at 1. What puts St. Cloud ahead of Denver for you?
I think it's close. I don't think that any team is going to run away with this conference. For me, the question marks, which St. Cloud definitely has a few. Talking about some of the other teams, thinking about Bassie moving into full-time duty this year, and that is going to be a change for him. At least with St. Cloud, like last year, he was a little under half the games because Castor kind of took over towards the end of the season last year. But for a lot of that first half of the season, Bassey, I thought, had the slight edge over Castor, but we'll see how he handles what we are figuring is going to be much more regular 2-night-a-weekend work. And there was a question mark there, but I feel confident in him in a way that I didn't last year with the goaltending tandem situation. And so, again, I might be wrong about that, but I am feeling somewhat comfortable in net. And I'm really feeling comfortable with the back end, with the defense. I love Anhorn coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're on record saying Anhorn's a Hobie candidate. If things shake out well, if they are in first place, it's probably large part because of Anhorn. Yep. And so
if they're in first place, I say Anhorn's probably top 3 Hobie.
That's not a bad bet, I think. And then Peart as well. We're seeing it perhaps like all come into place for Peart, who's had a slow sort of progression to elite status. But I saw him be it was a preseason, was it CHN's preseason teams, which again, take those with grains of salt, but Peart was mentioned on one of those teams. So I think his stock has risen pretty high, and I'm excited to see him really kind of emerge as like a dominant force.
I'm really excited to see what he does this season. We've and maybe it's because we saw him so much in freshman make so many great plays, so many bad plays. We like really seeing him mature, had a really strong season. I'm just excited to continue this growth and really see what he can do this season.
Right. And as far as the biggest question mark being centers, it concerns me, but it doesn't concern me enough as, say, like North Dakota having to rebuild the entire defense on the fly, or even like Denver having to turn to Matt Davis for a full-time role. Like, I think they have the talent there. It's a question of how quick is the talent going to develop into something where they can translate that into a championship team. And I think it's going to take a while for those third and fourth lines, bottom six forwards to gel a little bit. I think you're going to use that first half of the season to find out who exactly is going to emerge out of that group in terms of particular centers, but just snipers in general, finishing type players. But the top two lines, I like the top half of this this group of forwards. I'm really looking for Ingram to have a breakout season. Seemingly sort of saw glimpses of that in the second half last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to have the kinds of opportunities. We already saw him sort of become a regular on the power play towards the end of the season. And I think there's no reason for that not to change this year. And I think he's going to become a force on the power play. And this is a team that, we've seen Brett Larson have a very good power play year in and year out for this team. It goes through stretches of ineffectiveness and goes through spurts of, score. What was the St. Thomas weekend a couple years ago? 7 goals in a game on the power play. So it can be a little boom or bust, but in the overall season numbers, very strong power play typically. They have struggled with the penalty kill in the past, and that's certainly something that we want to clean up this year. I think with having a full season of Anhorn, that's going to hopefully shore that up, I think, a little bit. So the question marks I have would be the depth, but I do I think that the scoring, they might not have the best line in the conference. Like we're talking about North Dakota and we're talking about Denver having elite top lines. Maybe St. Cloud doesn't have that, but they might have the best, as it turns out, and maybe they have the best top 3 lines of the conference. I think that depth is going to be something that it might take them a little bit to figure out, but I think they've got the pieces to make it work. And it's going to be interesting how it shakes out, who the prime freshman scores are going to be. I have we saw in the red black game, the little exhibition game they played on Sunday, looks like Barrett Hall was getting a fair amount of special teams time, power play time, top line action. I'm excited to see Barrett Hall because, we're talking about other freshmen coming in this season. He's kind of an under the radar candidate to really emerge as a star player here, even this year, much less, in the future for the Huskies as well. And if he's going to be giving those sort of prime opportunities, that's a possibility for being a great pickup for Larson. So
makes me a little bit worried for my Barrett Hall, Grace Delmonico.
I did think about
that. If he's going to be with Ingram and Okabe, and
right.
That's
right.
Ooh, I'm not liking my choice right now. But
and as we've seen in the past, like, we're not thinking that that's going to be the top line. Maybe that's going to be the top line when we start the season here against St. Thomas, but come March, it might be something totally different. But if that's going to be how we start, that means that guys like Miettinen are going to be on the second line. Perhaps putting Miettinen not against other teams' top line, maybe that will spring him for even more of a productive season. Yeah. And we're talking about a guy who's had a 30-point season last year, and so a 30-point season, and we tend to complain about him a lot, and so. That gives you an idea of the depth that St. Cloud can bring to the table. If they've got, second line guys flirting with 40 points, and I know a lot of that's on power play as well, but still, I think this team has the weapons. We've got the depth available. It's just a matter of them clicking. And I don't think that you need to rely on freshmen. Like, I don't think that the season hinges on Barrett Hall, but they could be the X factor from like making this team into a Penrose winner. And so I know this is coming from a eternal pessimist. Me placing them first place, it's like I'm reverse jinxing the Huskies. I almost feel like I'm doing this wrong, and maybe the conventional wisdom is to go with Denver. But something about this team, I last year I had a hunch that they're going to be better than what people were thinking as well, and this year too, I think that they're flying a little under the radar, and I think they have a serious chance of getting another Penrose this year, and just excited to see how it all shakes out. But what else are you feeling about this Huskies, in particular in the context of the rest of the league?
I do think top to bottom we've got the best defense. And I think that goes a long way. Obviously, we've got 5 major returners coming back. Reiners and Wiley maybe isn't as big as major returners, because Wiley and Reiners kind of switched back and forth throughout the year, and I know people liked Wiley a little bit more over Reiners. As it happened kind of towards the end of the year. But I really loved how all of them kind of work together, bringing Falk in as well, somebody who's established, who's going to be kind of your, stay-at-home type guy, and kind of a shutdown D. I think that's a huge boost. And I think it's going to be tough to score on this team. And I think we've got enough scoring up front where we can win. We might not win games as big as we used to in some of those other, high-powered offenses that we've had, but, we're going to probably win a few more 3-1 games, 4-2 games, kind of in that instance. Really excited to see where, kind of Ingram, moving him to center, his natural position. After, a year, like you said, he found his groove there at in the second half of this freshman campaign, and him moving in, I think, is going to be a good step for him going back to his natural. Obviously, we talk a lot about Salquist on this podcast. Him as a second line center, maybe a little bit scary, but I'll work through it. But I think, Go Huskies Woo, always his dark horse. And it's somebody that I'm going to be really keeping an eye on, and that's Jack Rogers. I don't know if I have him as a 40-point player, that Go Huskies Woo has him predicted as, but from all accounts, he looked really good in the red-black game, and we'll see kind of where his how he progresses this season. But if he can bring in some of that scoring punch into the deeper lines, I think that's going to be a good, obviously a really good sign for St. Cloud. But yeah, I just worry a little bit up the middle, Ingram, Salquist, and then really it just unknowns and a lot of freshmen there for centers, which is an incredibly hard position to come to in this league. So we might be chasing the puck a little bit, but I think we've got the defense to kind of shut it down and get the puck back. And I do, I used to think of this season as maybe a little bit of a lull season when we get some more recruits kind of coming in, because I'm really excited for some people we have in the pipeline now. But I'm getting more and more optimistic of this, and I think a lot of it starts with the back end and the stability in goal. I do think we're going to see, maybe Gray a little bit more than we originally think we would. But I think also that's not a bad thing, considering, you never know when pneumonia can hit. So.
Right. So, I've got him first in the conference. I think that pretty much assumes that they're going to make the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
You've got him second, but just put it on record. You think this is an NCAA tournament team?
Yes.
Okay. I obviously agree. This would keep the streak alive for Larson, if we're not counting the COVID year, which some people don't, because there technically wasn't a NCAA tournament. He's made it every year that he's been a head coach. And so whether or not you want to count that year, it's an impressive run so far. And he has shown the ability to reload and to come through with teams like last year, which didn't have the kinds of expectations as other teams had. And, finding a guy like Anhorn, which this time last year we weren't expecting what we got out of Anhorn. Is there going to be a guy like that this year where we haven't even mentioned him today? That by the end of the year we're saying, boy, this was a home run. The fact that we have some candidates, I think, is part of the fun. But you've mentioned Rogers. I think
I'm going to have to eat crow. If Rogers puts up 50 points, I'm going to have to eat crow.
Well,
that's for sure.
I think we're all eating a whole murder of crows at that point. But yeah, it's going to be a fun season because I think there's a lot to work with here. And like I said, it's interesting to see who exactly is going to emerge as like either a surprise candidate, someone that we just aren't talking about right now. Like, I don't know, Molinar as a captain has a huge season. I actually think Kupka, it sounds like he was getting power play time as well. I think Kupka, I was high on him last year, 25-point season last year in a injury shortened season. Think about maybe stepping him up into the 30-point plateau. Like, that's the kind of depth. Yeah, we might have Stelquist at second line center, which I'm not saying that's going to stay exactly the same, but he could work at second line center if he's feeding off into his line mates, and so I think that can work as well. So, yeah, I'm excited about this team, and because I do think there are some storylines that we're going to see answered here, especially that first half of the year. It's going to be like all these freshmen that we have. I think we're going to have a bit of a filtering of the kind of talent that's going to help us this year, and their roles as well, because we've got so many guys that play center. It's not necessarily, as we saw with like Ingram last year, it's not necessary that they're all going to stick at center this year. We might try them out on the wing, and because of that numbers game, we're going to figure out who emerges from these kind of positional battles. And I think it's going to make the season intriguing from that perspective to follow, but also exciting, because I think there's a lot of promise with this group. So yeah, very excited to see how this season shakes out.
So to recap, I have 1 through 8: Denver, St. Cloud, Omaha, Western Michigan, Minnesota, Duluth, North Dakota, CC, Miami, and Andrew.
I have St. Cloud State at number 1, Denver number 2, Minnesota, Duluth at 3, North Dakota at 4, Omaha at 5, Western Michigan at 6, Colorado College at 7, and Miami at 8.
Yep. So we'll find out how wrong we are at the end of the season, because everything is going to be.
And we do keep ourselves honest. We will circle back to this at the end of the year and show our receipts, say how wrong we were.
Exactly. So we're an hour and a half plus into this. We have games this weekend. The women playing Mercyhurst, and the men playing a series against St. Thomas. Flow Sports, by the way, also will have the women's games. So they'll have Mercyhurst as well. So you get a little bit more bang for your buck as well, because they'll have obviously the St. Thomas and then the Mankato games.
And I'm wondering too, because we mentioned they play Northeastern coming up, the women's team. Now that's actually in the Icebreaker, which is at your favorite Atlantic hockey program, Sacred Heart.
Brown. Oh no.
And
Atlantic hockey. Okay.
And that's at Sacred Heart, and they have a new facility just opened in the middle of last year. It's supposed to be pretty nice facility there in the state of Connecticut. So I'm assuming if they're hosting the Icebreaker that Flow Hockey is going to be covering those games as well, which is also in October. So if you get Flow, you'll get to see the 2 women's games this weekend at Mercyhurst, and then you should be able to if it's what I expect is that they'll show games that are hosted by Atlantic hockey teams. You should be able to get those Icebreaker games later in the month as well from Sacred Heart. And that, like I said, that Husky versus Husky matchup with them in Northeastern should be an intriguing battle.
Very much so.
But and then you get the men's game on Sunday versus St. Thomas when they play at St. Thomas. They play at home on Saturday to start the season, and then play on Sunday at St. Thomas, and you can pick that game up on Flow Sports as well.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure, because it's $30 a month, but I think you get everything Flow has to offer, correct? Or do you just get one?
That's what it was last year, at least. No, well, yeah. I mean, I was just doing hockey. I know that they have other sports. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
But basically, I'm thinking also because they have USHL games too. So So if you want to peer in, because you'll have it for the month. Now they do it billed annually, so they have a special where it looks like it's only $12, but you'll get charged $150 if you do that. So be careful when you sign up. Just pick the $29.99 a month, unless you want it for the whole year. I guess it's you'll get a lot of hockey that way and a lot of other sports. But yeah. So I mean, we can look at some USHL games as well and kind of see prospects of Huskies down the pipes, and I think a lot of Canadian junior games as well. The second tier, I don't think any of like the major juniors, but where the recruits come from, BCHL, AJHL, etc. So how about we go women playing Mercyhurst? We'll touch on that quick. We'll touch a little bit on St. Thomas, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. Got a couple of questions here, but just a little bit, couple minute blurb kind of on both. I know we talked a lot about St. Cloud men's already, so we don't have to go too much into that, but just kind of maybe what you're looking for against St. Thomas. But let's start out with the women's here against Mercyhurst. Back in action and going on the road to Mercyhurst, who I believe last weekend they got swept, correct? Let me just double check. Yes, they got swept.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, by at St. Lawrence, 5-1, and then a 6-5 game in overtime.
Yeah, so I did some scouting on Mercyhurst.
I have not.
Last
so
weekend.
Thank you for doing that. They had a good
record
last year, but I think they played just really bad teams.
Mercyhurst. Yeah, I mean, mentioned last podcast, sort of mid 2000s, they were, like a perennial tournament team. Again, they play in the CHA in women's hockey, which is kind of the Atlantic equivalent for women's hockey. They're in fact, they are sort of affiliated because the commissioner, they just had a new commissioner last year, Michelle Morgan, and they were announced she's the commissioner for both Atlantic Hockey and CHA. So I don't know why they don't just merge it into one name, but two separately named conferences, but they're affiliated, have the same commissioner. But for many years, Mercyhurst was like the team to beat in that conference, and made a couple of Frozen Fours even. It's been some time since the peak of the program, but, they're pretty consistent contender, 20 win seasons throughout the last 4 years. And yeah, even 2009, they were a runner-up, national runner-up, made the national title game. So it's been a bit since their peak, but still, I think a quality team. And so I watched that Saturday game. I was flipping back and forth between them and Colgate hosting Ohio State, a great early season marquee matchup, 2 versus 4 in the country.
Yeah.
I don't like saying that because that just is giving too much credence to the Astro poll, but
especially
any way you put it,
preseason.
Colgate, right. Early season Astro polls are not to be trusted, but in any case, these are two quality teams. Colgate hosting a regional last year, Ohio State as well. Ohio State was the number 1 overall last year. Colgate has been emerging as, like, they're even sort of topping Clarkson as the ECAC's best team. And so that was a great matchup in 2 very closely played games. Colgate winning on Friday, coming back from a 2-0 deficit. And then, they had the 2-0 lead. Ohio State tied it. Colgate scores in the last minute to win 3-2. On Saturday, Ohio State gets out to the 2-0 lead. And then Colgate comes back in the third period, ties it with a late goal on a power play, and then wins it in overtime. Ohio State wins it in overtime. So a split, 3-2 games each way. And I was flipping back and forth between that game and the Mercyhurst game because I wanted to see Mercyhurst, see what they had to offer. So through the second period, I can't remember if it was 3-1 or 4-1 after the second, but it was 4-1 in the third, and I flipped it over to the Colgate game. And at that point, Colgate had scored to make it 2-1 to make it a little bit of a game. So I'm just, I'll just keep it here. It looked like the Mercyhurst game was not in doubt at that point. It looked like Mercyhurst was going to win. So after the game is over in Colgate, I flip it back over, and I almost figuring that the game's going to be over. And it's in overtime at 5-5. Like, what happened here?
Yeah, I'm looking at this score. Holy cow.
So I rewound it because I wanted to see it. And it's 4-2 with like 2.5 minutes to go. Mercyhurst scores an empty netter. So St. Lawrence pulls their goalie. Mercyhurst scores an empty netter. And then immediately after that, St. Lawrence takes a cheap shot penalty. So they even go shorthanded with like 2 minutes and change to go in the game. Mercyhurst up 3, and they're on the power play. Well, they put the face off. Mercyhurst immediately takes a penalty. It's like a makeup call. And so it's 4-on-4. Then about 30 seconds later, Mercyhurst takes another penalty, so it's 4-on-3. And St. Lawrence has been pulling the goal the entire time. So now they got a 5-on-3. The minute 17 left, they score a third goal. So it's 5-3 with a minute 17 left. Score a fourth goal with 50 seconds left.
Jeez.
And then they score again with the net empty. This whole time, net's empty. There really wasn't like a close call with like a empty netter for Mercyhurst either. Like St. Lawrence pretty much had control of the puck the whole time. And then they score the tying goal with like 3 seconds to go or something. Just a dramatic sort of game tying goal. And then in overtime, they score, St. Lawrence does, with about 2 seconds to go in overtime. So sort of like buzzer beaters at both regulation and in overtime to win a game. If you're talking about like those like probability graphs of a game. Like, can you imagine how big it would have been at 5-2 with right after they take the penalty, like 5-2 on the power play with an empty net? It had to be 99.9%, but it would have gone all the way down. That would have been one game where I would have had to buy you 2 growlers of beer
right?
if we were going to make a bet at that game. So I don't know. Prior to that, and I watched like the period and a half prior to that, again flipping kind of back and forth. But Mercyhurst looked pretty strong. But obviously they have a problem finishing out the game at the end here, and so a bit of a vulnerability there at the end and on special teams. So being road games here for the Huskies, these games we played in Mercyhurst in Erie, PA, it will be a challenge that for St. Cloud. It's going to be a tougher opponent than Union was. But, excited to see. I mean, St. Cloud had the weekend off, so can't recap any of their action. But excited to check out a little bit this action this weekend. And if they can get a split, that's perfectly fine. If they can get a sweep, awesome. But even if they lose a game here, I'm not writing off the season because I think Mercyhurst is decent. It's just they have some flaws. St. Lawrence exposed them, and let's see if St. Cloud can continue the trend. Either that, or I was also thinking like maybe you get a pissed off Mercyhurst team now.
Yeah.
Like if they would have just won that game against St. Lawrence, maybe they wouldn't have taken St. Cloud as seriously as they may do now because they got a chip on their shoulder. So watch out for a team that's trying to stave off sort of a run of bad luck here, coming off kind of a disastrous loss.
Yeah. And looks like this also might be the Olivia Svar Redemption series. As
there you go.
Olivia was a member of the Huskies and transferred over to Mercyhurst. So that'd be a storyline to watch. But yeah, I'm excited to see the series and see the women play again and just kind of see more and how they stack up. So it's going to be, I assume they're going to split time again between the goaltenders. When you get 2 high caliber goaltenders, it's probably going to be the case. So it's it's going to be kind of fun to watch that, and hopefully they'll come out with a sweep. So St. Thomas. Now St. Thomas, who got a first place vote in the CCHA preseason poll. I don't really know what to make of this.
Do we have a story about that, by the way?
Like, did somebody come out and say it was me?
Do we know? Yeah. Do we know who voted for them?
Not a clue.
Or if that was a mistake? Because that seems
I mean, they even seemed higher than I thought they would be. I mean, even like in totality. I mean, I guess maybe the number one place vote kind of bumped them up a little bit, but I'm
sure it did. Yeah, because they finished ahead of Mankato in the poll, and I'm sure the difference was that first place vote. But
yeah, exactly. So, I'm really excited, obviously, to see the freshmen in the line pairings and kind of see how everything kind of sets up, and to see if Brett's going to make in-game changes when it comes to the line pairings. I obviously, with St. Thomas still being new and not, and still kind of finding its footing, I do predict a St. Cloud sweep is in the cards. But we've seen St. Thomas kind of give some team fits, and Blasi is a solid coach, and I think he's laying some solid groundwork there. They're still obviously a couple years out, but I do think that one of these games might be a little bit tougher, a little bit closer than probably it needs to be. Still think they come out with the sweep, but we'll see how everything shapes out. What are you looking forward for this series?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm picking St. Cloud to be first in this conference,
they better
you can't dump a game this weekend. But as you said, I think you got to take St. Thomas seriously. We have seen improvement, particularly the second half of last year. had some decent wins, beating a game, winning at Michigan Tech, winning against Bowling Green. You won at Mankato. That was an overtime win, but still winning at Mankato. Win against Bemidji late in the season. They took care of business against like a Lake State, who they finished ahead of last year. Lake State was unbelievably terrible last year. And so I think they're a team again. So 11 wins last year, and that was, definitely improvement on the 3-win season from their first season in D1. So, an 8-win improvement. But I still think this is a team that St. Cloud has, obviously, the talent advantage on. Their top scorer last year, Mac Byers, a Northern Michigan transfer, 28-point season, not too bad. Their second leading scorers is Josh Earness. That was the subject of the little grapple they had at the coaches convention because he got scooped up by Michigan.
That's right.
And the St. Thomas brass thought that some shenanigans were at play there. And so big loss for them in terms of he was the second leading scorer on the team, and he's no longer there. So, and they, active in the transfer portal as they have been since they've been in D1. Got a couple of the Wisconsin rejects, I suppose. And Ryder Donovan, who was a drafted player, but he was a complete bust with the Badgers. This Liam Malmquist as well, another cast off from the Badgers. A couple of CC players they picked up. This Matthew Gleason, who I think played at St. Thomas as a prep player. I might be wrong on that, but he came back as well as this Noah Prokop. So they picked up some guys in the portal, and so I think they're, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't think they're first place in the CCHA. I think that's crazy, but I don't think they're last place either. I think they're solidly 6th or 7th. I wouldn't say they're even a top half of the league team, but it's going to drive me crazy who voted for them, because I'm wrecking my brain. Like, I'm looking at this roster and I just don't know how you can.
You don't see it.
Even pick them for like a 4th place. I don't I don't see how you jump them to first. But in any case,
someone's doing it for the lulz.
Either that, or it's like, well, who was picked first? And is it coaches that vote for this? Because I could see, like, if it's one of the teams up top that was really wanting to win the preseason poll that says, well, we'll pick it to St. Thomas because no one else is going to pick them. Like, rather than like picking another one of the actual contenders, because that way that would boost them up higher. See what I'm saying? Like, but that's all in service of trying to win a preseason poll, which is a pretty low bar,
which is pretty
low achievement.
Sure enough.
But hey, crazier things have happened.
Yeah.
But
Michigan Tech was picked to win the conference.
Okay, so maybe Michigan Tech's coach is thinking big brain here and thinking, we really want this preseason honor.
Who is that?
Of being the
Shawhan.
It's either Shawhan or Sean. I don't know if it's 1 or 2 syllables, but it looks like Shawhan. But so that's what we're going to go with. But anyway, yeah, and you're playing in St. Thomas as well, and so going on the road anywhere is going to be a challenge. So I definitely don't think these are going to be blowouts. This is not going to be the 11-2 drubbing that St. Cloud put on them a couple years ago to sort of christen their D1 era. I think you're gonna have more competitive games. Like last year, you had a 3-1 game in the opener at St. Thomas, and then a 4-0 win at home, which I believe was scoreless after the first period. It was tight there for a bit. So I would expect closer contests of that nature. And it's not going to completely shock me if we see like a 3rd period game here in St. Thomas is tied, something like that. But I'm expecting. I'm curious to see what the goaltending is going to be like this weekend because you're playing St. Thomas. Do you try to get some action with non-Bassy goaltenders, or do you kind of just stick with your starter here right away? It'll be interesting to see, because I think you want to get I mean, we should mention in that Black-Red game, Gray did not play due to some injury, which Larson classified as minor. So it was just Bassi and Posh that played. I essentially would think they both played the entire game for whatever side they were on. But disappointing that he didn't get some action, Gray, because I would have assumed that he's going to be the number 2 rather than Posh just because of age. But sometimes this is how it happens. Like if Gray has got a bad hammy or something, and Posh is the first sort of backup out of the gate, maybe he impresses in that initial sort of tryout kind of phase, and he emerges as a viable candidate for some significant ice time. Who knows? I'm curious to see how Gray, if he, when he takes the ice, if he can show something as well. So I would assume Bassey's going to get both starts, but it wouldn't shock me if one of the other two get another one of the starts as well. So, but yeah, and seeing who's benched this weekend, we might see some surprising names. Last year I remember Sahlquist. That was the one game he didn't play. It was one of the St. Thomas games because they're sort of giving the younger guys. We saw all like a Sean, a Coyne. We saw those guys play like a game last year against St. Thomas. Seeing if this year, you might see a surprising scratch. I wouldn't freak out too much about it because I think more importantly, you kind of want to get these guys ice time. You don't want to have them sit on the bench too long, especially when we're coming into conference play. So it'll be an interesting 2 weeks here. You got St. Thomas and then you got Mankato kind of start out with some CCHA teams, and both teams which have a lot of question marks. I think St. Cloud will be the favored team in both of these weekends, but I'm excited to see both the new players for St. Cloud and also just how they're able to, how this defense is going to assert itself offensively and defensively. Those things are kind of what I'm looking for. But yeah, I would be really disappointed with anything less than a sweep. And let's hope that next week we're not coming in here with some head scratching.
Right?
Like, maybe we were wrong. Let's take care of business and beat a team that you should beat.
All right. Quickly, firing 4 questions. Does Gray see any time this season from Clint? I think so. I probably even think about 25% of the games, I would say. And I know that's a little bit higher than most people say. Again, that's just all PTSD from Rennick going down. I think, giving Bassi also some time and off, I think is good throughout the season. But more importantly, I want somebody to, not all of a sudden where it's like, oh, there's a key moment, let's throw you out there, and then we get a Castor Quinnipiac situation where everything goes, pear-shaped really quickly. But I know, Andrew, you kind of think it's going to be quite a few less than that, correct?
Well, no, I think in our KVSC episode, I think I had 8, and I'm not sure if I lumped that in with just non-Bassi starts.
I think you lumped it in with non-Bassi,
specifically Gray.
That makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, this injury, Larson's saying it's minor, but how many times have we heard that? Like, oh, it's a minor injury, let's ice it off.
It's minor pneumonia.
6 months later, 6 months later, oh, that's right, he missed the whole season. So I around 25%, which would be, in a 40-game season, 25% is 10 games. So I would say that sounds about right for non-Bassi starts.
Gotcha.
I just don't know if Posh is going to get some of those.
Sure.
Based on how much this injury is going to be lingering for Gray. I would assume, like I said, that Gray's going to be the first out of the gate, but I wouldn't be shocked either if Posh is the one that kind of emerges as the number 2.
Dan Jacobson, what do you think about Edge showing up in AEW? Yeah, that was a really big surprise. I hope, wrestlers, you don't really retire. Like, anytime anybody has like a retirement match or a winner go home match or loser leaves town, obviously it's not the case. And, hopping from promotion to promotion makes sense. I just, with all of the injuries Edge has had, like, I know you love the business and all, but just be a promoter. Don't actually continue wrestle, especially with everything we know now about CTE. Just you can still be in wrestling because you love it. Just not. You're still going to get the pop, which is what you want anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, see with Christian what type of storylines they come up with. It'll be interesting. Any thoughts on that?
I agree 100%.
How many wrestlers can you name? Like when you think of wrestling, like
Gorgeous George.
Oh wow! Holy cow!
Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage.
Okay, so that's kind of your wheelhouse when it comes to
Mankind.
Oh, okay.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. Kevin Nash.
Interesting. You got kind of a smorgasbord there. Gorgeous George.
Yeah, I was like, probably my 8th grade. I would have watched, the Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, the Monday Night Wars was
whatever that would have been in the late 90s.
WWE.
I was in it for like 1 year.
WCW were really clashing back and forth.
Was it Diamond Dallas Page?
DDP.
That one?
Yeah. The Diamond Cutter.
So Rey Mysterio.
Oh, yeah.
See one?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm weird like that. It's like with me with operas. We were talking about that a couple. Like I can rattle off a bunch of different stuff, even from areas that I don't really follow all that closely.
Yeah,
so
all of a sudden,
don't underestimate
citing Labo M. The last one here is from Alex, KVSE Alex. Thoughts on wearing red or black at home occasionally? I've got actually maybe a little bit of a hot take. I don't really care for black jerseys, even in general. I like color. That's why I like color on color matches. I know red's kind of tough because red's like the most common for color blindness. With red and green, I think. But I would love wearing more red at home. Black, like when we wear black on the road, I just find it boring a little bit. And that just my thoughts. I'm A-okay with it. In general, I'm not too much of a stickler about like every once in a while switching it up when it comes to jerseys, but I do like whites at home because I like to see the colors of the other teams more, like with the jerseys. Just so you get more variety that way. So if it's like just like dark is always the home jerseys, then you're always just wearing the same color over and over again, and you're getting the other team's same color. Whereas North Dakota you get the blue, and then CC you get the yellow, and whatnot. So that's kind of my thought process when it comes to colors and on jerseys.
Well, yeah, and I'm wondering if the women are planning on doing this because both of the
I thought that was
Union,
weird. Yeah, both of the Union at home were wearing black,
and both the blacks.
I got
so
another
that
hot
was
take. Just as we're coming back to it, I've come around on the dog logo. And maybe it's just because I'm used to it and I don't really care to get angry about it now, but I'm kind of come around on it. And it's like when it was on the women's black jerseys too, maybe because there was a lot more red on it as well. I was like, this kind of looks sharp. I kind of like it.
I mean, I like the C logo, but I almost like those. Maybe it's just because I haven't seen it as much. I'm not a huge fan. I agree with the black C logos or jerseys. That's my least favorite of the jerseys that the men's team wears. Yeah. If you put the dog on a black jersey, that was at least a change of pace. Like I didn't mind it. I wish that they would have worn, if they're going to wear color at home, I would have preferred them to wear red at least in one of those games. And I don't know if that's going to be like a thing this year. Or, I don't think it's like a, NHL dictates that you have to wear colors at home. I don't think that there's been any sort of change league-wide. When I was watching those non-conference games, again, non-conference, but the road team was wearing the dark colors and the home team was wearing white. So Colgate and St. Lawrence didn't get the memo if St. Cloud got one about wearing colors at home. But Yeah, I was surprised that they wore it both nights too. I thought maybe okay, just for the season opener, we're gonna change it up.
Sure.
That it's gonna go back to the white for the second day, but no, it was colors both nights. So yeah, I'm certainly for it.
Also, just quickly, Husky anime dog logo that it was faces left, and I thought that was really interesting. So it would have been that logo and Vermont be the only ones.
Maybe that's why
now it's like
maybe that's why they were
now we're head on, and Vermont's the only one facing left. But my Twitter sources tell me when I showed the comparison is hashtag change the logo to Vermont. Everyone was like, "Ooh, that does look better going to the right." So there's some kind of human mentality of it going to the right. Where
I actually Googled that,
Ooh.
like if there is a graphic design principle that says that you should go to the right. And there was some article. Are you familiar with this guy? Paul Lucas is his name. He runs a blog called UniWatch. He's like, all he does is write about logos and uniforms. It's like his entire beat.
What a niche you never knew you needed.
And it's fascinating. Like, remember when he like grades whenever a team like does a redesign, like he'll grade it and he'll just go super in depth into things that you didn't even consider. Like when he was doing when the Twins, getting back to our favorite team, when they did their redesign this past winter, he's all like, yeah, this is kind of weird because like their home jerseys are more like red dominant, whereas I feel like the Twins are more of a navy blue dominant team. So this is sort of like, I'm like, I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. And so he thought that he was mostly thinking in terms he did all the sports, but he said he thought that it might have been because NFL, when they show like the helmets, those are all pointing right. And he's like, I think the only reason that is because the Steelers on the left side of their logo don't have anything. Mm-hmm. You know, they only have the circle with the dots or whatever on the one side of the helmet.
Only NFL.
So you think that's why NFL has all their logos pointed to the right, because of the Steelers being weird. But I don't know. Google it and you can. But he also said he thinks that it's probably because we in the West read from left to right.
Gotcha.
And sort of like the general sort of the eyes tend to follow to the right. So I think that is the general principle. But it is kind of fascinating to nitpick to that sort of level why the logos are the way they are. But yeah, I wouldn't be against playing colors sporadically. I would sort of push back, like I think he said last year, was it CC was gonna wear yellow at home if they won on Fridays.
Yep.
Like I don't like planning stuff like that. Just like have a random day, like kind of how baseball is. I think how they say like whoever like picks the uniform top, it's like the starting pitcher gets to decide. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, we're gonna wear the grays tonight, or we're gonna wear the blues tonight. Just do it randomly like that. Don't have a set like, oh, on Saturdays that end in a odd number, we're gonna wear golds. Like, make it less like scheduled.
I mean, CC should just always wear the golds. I don't know why that's an issue in general, but
right. I agree with that.
Maybe that's why I hate Mayotte, because he just doesn't institute just gold jerseys for them. Why do you have another color even? Because I mean that's what makes like Sweden international competition. They don't have a white jersey. They just have the dominant blue or the dominant yellow.
Right.
So, but anyway, I love color. And I think there's so much white already on the ice surface, you know, even though I do like how our white jerseys look, you know, I like color on color matches that way. On the other hand, because that there's so much white on the surface, I'm actually in favor of painting the ice blue, like NHL 94, by the way.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it would just look so much nicer in like a lighter blue color like that. But anyway, nobody asked me these questions. I could change the game, make it more pleasurable to the eye. White is the worst color on TV to look at. Whole 98% of the screen is covered in it. Anyway, that's enough of that rant. Well, we're over 2 hours. That about does it. Right, so
Man, about does her.
well, thanks for going through this season preview and looking forward to this weekend and the games. Again, Flow Sports. Just select the $30 one unless you want the full season. They'll get you. I'm Weldie. You can reach me on Twitter at @MoreClappers, MOAR Clappers, or you can search for me on Blue Sky too. I am there as well. Andrew, what email address can they find you?
You can email me at huskieshockeypodcast@gmail.com.
Send them an email.
Send me an email.
Perfect.
I'll give you an email back.
All right. Sounds good. Until next time, go Huskies. Woo!
Woo!